Thank you, guys. There we go. Thank you, guys, for coming. Call the meeting to order. We have two bills on the docket today. We have HB 1133 and we have HB 1322. Chokus, you're here, so let's go ahead and hit up 1133.
All right. There we go. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I just wanted to thank you in advance for allowing me 3 hours to present my bill. And
we're not going to do that long.
But anyway, I bring before your consideration today House Bill 1133, and it's Committee Sub LC 365127S. And I said a lot of this the other day in the full committee during the hearing, but it bears repeating some of it. It simply allows for the resale of electricity for charging electric vehicles. Currently, electric vehicle charging stations, the electricity is sold by the minute. HB 1133 would allow charging stations to resell electricity by the kilowatt, which is a better unit of measurement for electricity. Electric vehicles are growing in popularity. Tesla is a tremendous success story and has opened up new markets. All the major manufacturers of automobiles are creating electric vehicles, and I've read that heavy equipment such as 18-wheelers and farm tractors are being developed. But the key, as I said last time, to this industry is battery technology. Electricity storage in batteries has improved tremendously over the years. And some of the things that I wanted to share with you about battery technology and the future, and the reason why this legislation I feel is so important, is that right now we're talking about charging electric vehicles. The major players that actually manufacture the charging or Charge Point. They came and spoke to the Small Business Committee, ABB, Enel, X, and Siemens. These are the big players in the equipment that are being used for charging. But that's current technology. The future is plug-free charging, where you would just drive over a pad and not have to connect anything. And that's how you will be charging your vehicles in the future, much the same way that we now have a thing that you put your cell phones in and they charge your cell phones without having to plug in. And the reason I bring this to the committee is to let everyone know that this isn't the end product. This is just the beginning. This is to let the marketplace and research continue. Tesla, which is the industry leader, has developed 2 charging stations in California, one in Hollywood and one that's online in Santa Monica Boulevard. The one on Santa Monica Boulevard accepts Dogecoin for payment. They also plan on having restaurants and diners at their charging areas. They currently have slots for 26 spaces. The other thing that they're planning on doing is put in drive-in theaters at their charging stations. Next generation batteries will be lithium ion, and these batteries will be able to charge in 15 minutes. There's concern about these precious metals and what it's going to do to the market. I read where one metal went up, and I can't remember, it was lithium, if I'm not mistaken, went from $32,000 a ton to $64,000 a ton. As these automobiles get online and as the manufacturers of the batteries advance with their research and development, you're going to see a lot of different changes. Anyway, and I already spoke to you guys about pre-charged battery placement. I mean, there's discussion right now underway and research underway where you would have pre-charged batteries at a convenience store or at a Walgreens in much the same way you have a propane tank, and you'd pull it out, put in another charge, and you're in and out in 5 minutes rather than the 15 or 20 minutes. And that would alleviate the problem with recycling batteries. The batteries somewhat are dangerous. That ship in the middle of the Atlantic that's on fire, they're saying that it was caught on fire by batteries in the vehicles on board. All the vehicles on board that ship, there's 4,000 vehicles with a estimated value of $430 million. Porsches, Audis, and predominantly BMWs are all EV. So there's safety issues, there's environmental issues with dealing with the batteries. This thing is moving forward and changing rapidly. And the reason for my legislation and the reason that I wanted to do it and change it from time but to kilowatt hours is because the older the battery in an electric vehicle, the less the electric charge it can retain. And there's a difference in how much time it takes and how much charge it takes for the batteries. So this will bring a standard unit of measure for all the batteries. And as I said, it's in its early stages of development. This is why that is why this legislation is simple yet broad in scope. It allows the marketplace and research to grow moving forward. Some key points of my legislation I'd like to point out, if I may, and this is on line 15 to 18. This simply confirms that people or companies who are not regulated by the Public Service Commission can offer electric vehicle charging services and not be subject to the jurisdiction of the Public Service Commission. This was what would allow kilowatt hour sales by private companies. On lines 18 to 22, this is that the sale of electricity for electric vehicle charging equipment from an electric utility is a retail sale of electricity and subject to Georgia sales taxes. This would protect the sales from potential federal regulation under the Federal Power Act by the Federal Electric Regulatory Commission. Line 19 references the definition of electric suppliers found in the Georgia Territorial Act, and line 22 refers to the state sales tax on electricity that electric suppliers collect and then remit to the state on the sales of electricity. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time. And I guess I've still got 2 hours and 50 minutes.
I don't know about your math there, sir, but so yeah, we're gonna take some questions. I do know, just for the members of the committee, we have two bills that go about the same thing in different ways. We have Chairman Powell's bill and Chairman Chokas's bill. We know that EV chargers are going to be an important part of the whole electric vehicle market. And as the electric vehicle market, I think as Chairman Chokas said, is growing, I think a number of lines of automobile manufacturers are now starting to, I think 2035, there's not supposed to be any more gasoline cars is the goal, but even sooner than that, I think they've announced a whole bunch of cars coming. So how do we get those vehicles charged, and who's able to get that? How are we able to get the charge to these people? And then, so we'll go start with questions. We'll go with number 7 first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Chokas, I have not heard anyone, no one's approached me anyhow, that's against the idea of going to a kilowatt hour sale of electricity. Do you know, is there any known opposition to that?
I haven't heard of any. There may be some, but I haven't heard of any. No, sir. That's
really my only, other than I want to, the chairman just mentioned that you said no more gasoline powered vehicles after 2035. I hope you mean no more manufactured, newly manufactured.
That's right.
Because I plan to have mine.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you.
My mechanic's going to appreciate that, I'm sure. Yep, we can go online. Yeah, Representative Kennedy.
Yes, can you hear me okay, Chairman?
Might be muted. Try it again.
How about now? Can you hear me?
We can, yeah.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Chairman Chokas, how does your bill distinguish itself from Chairman Powell's?
To be perfectly frank with you, I haven't read Chairman Powell's. I've just been focused on my bill, and my bill simply changes the unit of measurement from minutes or hours to kilowatt hours.
Okay, that's it. Nothing more?
Nothing more.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any more questions from the committee? No, I don't see any. I will say, I think that, like I said, you and Chairman Powell's are going about the same thing, kind of in different ways. I think what we have to figure out as a committee is what that looks like. And, it might be from a subcommittee that both come out and we figure it out in full committee. It might be that, none come out. Today is not we're not voting anything out today. But I do hope to get to that soon. I do think one component of that is that we need to continue conversations, understanding what both bills do, although they go about the same, end results the same. Well, the end goal is the same. How you get there is different. So which is the best for us in Georgia? Chairman Martin, you got something?
You brought up something. Chairman Chokas, all you're doing is change it from minutes to kilowatt hours. And you brought up some interesting things that I've heard before Energy Committee, around the country, about some of these things that you're going to be able to drive over a road and it's going to charge your cars. I want to say this as we're looking at this, that this would allow this to happen, but it's not going to happen overnight by itself. I mean, the fact that the car manufacturers decide they're not going to make any internal combustion engines doesn't necessarily mean that the grids are going to have trillions of dollars spent on it between now and 2025 to fix it. So we do have to address the issue, but as you read all about the future of charging, there's work to be done in addition to the language the gentleman has in the bill. Isn't that true?
Chairman Martin, thank you. I appreciate your comments, and that is true. And what's happened in this particular industry, and we've been studying. I dropped my first bill last year, and we decided to change it after we've did several presentations. We had the automobile industry come and present. We had the charging people come and present. It's interesting how this industry is evolving rapidly. And the big problem is range anxiety. And in my opinion, the marketplace is where you're going to cure the range anxiety. And I'm sure there'll be some other people that can speak on this, but convenience stores and fuel dispensers would be a perfect place for them to put these chargers, but they would not be the only place that we would put these chargers. I see in the future, and I heard a comment today about some agreement that Waffle House made with someone, where you're going to have these chargers at restaurants. And so when you get your tab at the end of your meal, there'll be a line item for how much charge you got as well. So you can pay for it with your credit card the same way you pay for your meal. But currently what's going on, and I think this is probably one of the reasons there's a lot of interest at this time, is the heavy government incentives that are being done, not only in the United States, but throughout the world. There's a lot of money coming in. And so obviously a lot of people wanted to investigate that and see if it would work for them. But currently there's a federal rebate of up to $7,500 if you buy an electric vehicle. So there's a big push towards that. But as I said earlier, I feel that the marketplace is the best place for these chargers to be and to proliferate rather rapidly. And the industry, even though you see phenomenal numbers of growth as a percentage, they're also relatively small when you look at the overall production of electric vehicles. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to answer any more questions, but I just want to say thank you for allowing me to make my presentation. And I did it with 2 hours and 45 minutes to
There you go.
spare.
Well, thank you for that, I guess. So are there any members, any more questions from the committee? From the members of the public who wish to speak, are there any that only wanted to speak to this bill? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to have Chairman Powell come up and give his presentation, and then we'll bring the members to speak. Either you're speaking, I'm guessing I'm taking that you're speaking either only for Chairman Powell's bill or for both bills, both bills combined. So Chairman Powell, if you want to come on up. We're talking about LC 5156S.
5156S.
That's correct.
Yes, that was a substitute that I had presented at the last meeting.
Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Chairman and other chairmen and all those in attendance. Thank you for this opportunity to speak today. I don't want to be redundant. I'm very grateful to my dear friend from Americas for having an interest in this. And when I say redundant, let me tell you, what he said was pretty well, I can echo it. I can say it in a different tone. But we know the law of the land of the federal government, they did the fossil fuel bill, and they're saying, and they've marked the trees to go forward for 2035 to do away with the fossil fuel production of fossil fuel vehicles. I'm not going to get into my opinion of the federal government nor for their action, but this is going to be one of the biggest transitions we've ever seen in this country in transportation and in way of life. Ever since there was a vehicle other than a horse and wagon, the motor vehicle has been an American phenomenon. People have had the mobility. They've accepted it. They've liked it. They want it. They like that convenience of pulling up to a pump, filling it up, and moving on. And that's what they do. We don't know, as I had said at the last meeting, we had a lot of hours of conversation with the utility companies. And, the first idea of this started out doing a lot of things. We were talking about setting rate bases. We were talking about all kind of stuff. But after probably 6 or 8 hours of sitting in the office with the utility companies and the powers that be, it dawned on me that we have a bigger issue. We don't need to get into the minuscule points at this time. And if you remember, the first section of the bill dealt with the findings. And I said something about the findings. It's almost like this new day of broadband. That back in the time, if we knew where broadband was going to take us, then we might very well have done some planning. We might would have laid a blueprint out so that we're not spending all of this money that's being spent to get caught up on broadband. And I look at this EV business the same way. One of the reasons I backed off of putting too much in the bill was because we don't know what the technology changes are going to be. I thought, quite frankly, I don't own a alternative vehicle, much less an electric vehicle, except for a golf cart. And, don't make any difference when I'm down on the lake if I drink too much. Hell, if I run in the lake and I ain't missed anything. But this is going to change our nation. And I want you to think in terms of the C-stores. I want you to think in terms of the racetracks, the golden pantries, all the convenience store chains that are out there. I want you to think about it in terms of the jobs that they produce, the property investments they have. I don't know if there's ever been a price put on the retail establishment of that based on convenience and based on petroleum sales. But eventually, even though we're less than 1% today, that's going to go away. Maybe. We don't know. They might be some of the new inventions that come up. They might be somebody that takes a page out of Star Trek, starts zipping us around. God won't that be a heck of a day. But still, we only can deal with what we're dealing with. The C-stores, the retail establishments, what they're doing right now is due diligence. The same as what the auto industry is doing. What is it? A number of the auto manufacturers have already put schedules that sometime between the next 5-6 years, they're going to quit making what we know is fossil fuel vehicles. We don't know whether they'll improve the battery life more than 300 miles. You know, they might invent something that they get 1,000 miles. It might very well make it worthwhile, but we don't know that right now. But we do know one thing, that we need to be prepared. The C-stores need to be prepared. And it's going to change the C-stores, folks. You know, if under the current technology, if somebody's going to pull up to a location and they know they're going to have to sit there for 20 or 30 minutes for a charge, well, you better have a bar and a grill, or you'd better have a game room, or you better have a shopping mall or something there, which then that brings it up to the other parts. And that's be restaurants may get into this. Supermarkets, you know, shopping centers. So it's going to change the whole face. But when I say it's going to change the whole face of America, it's going to change the face of Georgia. And what we've done in this bill, as I just said, we created some legislative findings that we need to be prepared. We don't need to overkill it. There's I look around, I don't know how many of y'all are going to be here. I don't know how many you're going to be here, including myself, next year, much less 2 years, 4 years, 6 years. But it'll be up to the next assembled group of legislators to make those minuscule decisions on a case-by-case point. And one of the things that my friend Chairman Chokus brought out, that they'll be changed. But I know in the determination that I made that's in this bill is two things. One is that we need to allow for the resale of power, and the language needs to be as such that we don't disrupt the Territorial Act. Secondly, which has probably created about as much heartburn philosophically, because the power companies don't want to admit it, but they have no business being in the business as a monopoly. They're the producer of power. They're the purveyor of the delivery system to power. And if they're going to be putting out chargers, and if they want to be in the business, this bill, as I told you last week, says, well, they can do it. And I never heard so much hand wringing about they want to be able to serve underserved areas. Well, that's fine. If they want to serve underserved areas, do it with a unregulated subsidiary that's not using the base to pay for it. If they want to be in this business, then they need to be straight up. They don't need to have a game table to the folks that they're selling power to. And that's quite frankly what it does. I know that a lot of the things, it's a lot of the anxiety that's gone back and forth. Listen, they're my friends. I've told the power companies, I'm your friend. I know the value. I'm a member of a couple of member co-op EMCs, because God knows I pay enough power utilities. I do pay Georgia Power as a stock-owned company. And I know they're there to make money. And I think everybody here that possibly owns stock in them, they want them to make money, but they want to do it fairly. But ladies and gentlemen, we need to set the guidelines. And that's what this bill, the substitute, does. You're going to hear the power companies try to play one against the other. I've had a little bit of fun with the two of the utility companies. I accuse some of their employees of being lobbyists for the other one, because if they can keep it confused, they will. And I don't think they're doing it intentionally. It's good natured. It's what it is. You know, these companies, they're mega giant corporations. Two different structures, one being a stock owned and the other being 41 separate companies that set and historically have set their own rates. They've set their own process. And I don't have a problem with that. But they're all going to be, whatever comes out of this, they're all going to be in line, because that's the nature of this utility business. and I applaud them. But what I do want to do in this bill, I want to set some standards and some goals for the utility companies, just as well as I do for my friends in the C-store business or the retail business or whatever. They need to have some guidance, because Georgia Power, the 41 EMCs, MEAG, they don't need to be out there doing things with big plans that's going to be scrapped at some point when some future legislature comes in here and they change the game. So this is just as, to me, this is just as important for the utility companies as it is for the retail establishments. I've spoken long enough, be glad to stand for questions. And if I can't answer them, I'm sure Chairman Chokus will.
We have any questions from the members of the committee? No questions.
Hallelujah.
I know. Anyone online? We good? Okay.
Chairman, thank you for bringing this bill. I will pose the same question to you that was posed to Chairman Chokus, is what is the material difference between y'all's bills?
I think material business is, when we talk about allowing the resale, I figured out with all the high priced lawyers that the utility companies have, they're paid by the word. There's 100 ways that you can achieve the same thing. I think Chairman Chokus's bill on describing the resale of, to allow the resale of power, I'm not even sure, it may be different than mine, but it achieves the same thing. Mine goes into a little bit more depth of saying, we're not going to allow a monopoly. We're not going to allow the utilities to use their rate base to subsidize EV business. If they want to be in it, do it with a subsidiary and be above board.
Thank
If I
you.
had to say the difference, that is the difference.
Yeah, thank you. I think part of that is related to on Chairman Powell's bill, line 65 and 66 is kind of what Chokus is doing, but kind of in a different way. So 65 and 66 on his is, I believe, similarly trying to get to the same effect as 15 through maybe 18 on Chokus's bill.
Thank you for pointing that out. 65, 66. You know, I'm not an attorney. I'm kind of simple. And to me, we looked at several different scenarios in these meetings, how to describe this, the resale of power. That looks pretty simple to me. To say that the sale of electricity from an electric supplier to an electric vehicle charging provider shall be deemed as a sale of an electric service for resale. That's pretty straight up. I don't know how that could get into the Territories Act, but if it does, I have nothing but confidence in this committee and Chairman Parsons' committee to walk through it, to cut to the chase, and to put the best language forward. And hopefully we can put a blueprint. One of the few times maybe the legislatures have put a blueprint out in advance so that something just doesn't get totally out of control.
Thank you. Chairman Martin.
Can you, I think you did this in the big hearing, but can you give us a quick recap of how it would work if you're a C-store and, you know, in an area that's served, a C-store that's covered in an area here that might be, you know, out along a well-traveled route, but just not a lot of electric, you know, infrastructure out there, and you wanted to put in 2, 3, you know, 1, 2, 3 charge stations that required additional infrastructure. I think you touched on how that would be done and how that would be, you know, the build out to them would be shared so as not to be put on the ratepayer. Can you highlight that real fast again for us?
Probably the C-stores and the electric companies can probably do a lot better job of that.
Okay, well,
But in the makeout, listen, we know that if you build something and it needs additional infrastructure to provide that power, there's always a charge.
No, exactly. I was just, so I'm happy to wait and let them describe that for you. Because my point was you have allowed that to be taken care of in the
I
legislation.
mean, I better.
and let them-
I
yeah.
don't want to damn confuse this issue.
Yes, sir.
By ramblings, but.
Yeah. No,
there are
fair enough.
those
I
who
just
can
wanted, the gentleman
do a better
is taking
job of
care of
that
that, I
than I
believe in there, and we can hear that testimony at the right time. Thank you.
Thank you. And a quick question. I know we have a question online for me on the way that Chokas's bill words it. I know you said that, lawyers wrote it, type of thing, not as clear layman's terms as I'm not a lawyer either. Just trying to understand what this stuff does is sometimes complex. For me, do you believe have you read Chokas's bill?
No.
Okay. I'd like to know, I'm not gonna put you on the spot, but is that something, the wording of what he's doing out of that one part of it, is that a problem rewording yours if there is a problem with the Territorial Act on either one? Is there?
I haven't dealt with public utilities for 32 years, and I served on the old House Industry Committee until it was disbanded, when we used to do public utilities as well as all the other things today. So I remember a little bit about dealing with utilities, but I also have faith in the committee system and the committee process. Y'all are the experts on this committee. If you want to talk about alcohol or something like that, I can talk to you. But y'all are the experts into this field. And whether it's the idea of Chairman Chokas or it's my idea or how it's written, doesn't mean it can't be changed. But I would have faith in this committee, working with Georgia Power, working with MEAG, working with my friends at the EMCs to draw specific language. I would also caution the committee members, don't fall for any games that they can't come up with an answer. They can come up with an answer, So, I'm all for it, but I'm not up here to try to disrupt the territorial system, because I understand the importance of that. But I have confidence in this committee, but I also have confidence that y'all understand what I'm saying, that we don't need to create or to let these companies get overboard and start creating or spending or planning for things that's going to be took away from them at some point that's going to make it even harder. We don't need a monopoly. They're there for their business. They're there for one business, and that's to produce and to distribute power. Let Angela Holland, let Roger Lane, let their customers, their members, they're the ones that's been in this business, and we're taking away from them. We're taking away from them a product that they've been selling, and that industry has been selling from the day that petroleum was sold from a glass container pump. So we owe these folks. We owe us an obligation. We don't want them going out of business.
Thank you. Who's online? Oh, Representative Kennard.
All right. I'm sorry, I'm not in the room, Chairman. Will we be hearing from Georgia Power and the EMCs today?
Yes, we will.
Okay, I'll reserve my questions for them. Thank you.
Sure. Yep.
Thanks, Chairman. My question is, it appears that both bills were drafted by Legislative Council number 36. I'm assuming that's Sean Marie.
Yes,
I
sir.
just wonder if she's in the room.
She's not here.
I think she's not. We do have
She's
a,
not here today. I'm filling in for her. I would be happy to speak to this.
So at whatever point after we hear testimony is, I'm struggling as a non-lawyer to understand why, if the intent is to allow the resale of electricity, why is there a difference in language between the two bills?
Sure. So I'm not Sean Marie, so thank you for bearing with me. But my understanding of the difference between these two bills, Mr. Chair, is in that second sentence on the substitute of Chairman Chakas's bill 365127. So the supply of electricity by an
What
electric
line?
supplier.
Line
That would be
18.
line 19 of that
Okay.
first bill we heard. Sorry, line 18, the supply of electricity by electric suppliers. So while a company that is supplying electricity to EVs will not be considered a public utility, that second sentence would say that that electric supplier is going to be treated the same as, I believe that part 1, article 1 of chapter 3, I believe that's dealing with electric utilities generally. And so it says that utility is still going to be treated as a utility for these purposes, but also still be deemed to be a sale at retail within the meaning of that tax section. So it's sort of a hybrid approach as far as I understand of how these electric utilities are going to be treated. And presumably then, and maybe the chairman can correct me on this, presumably then the utility would be able to recover some costs from ratepayers, et cetera, things that you've been talking about before. I might be wrong on that because this is not my primary area, but that is my understanding of the difference there between that language and line 65 and 66 on Chairman Powell's bill.
So again, in my layman's language, your legislative council stand-in, do I understand you to say that the language in Chairman Chokas's bill kind of better encapsulates and protects the current structure of our territorial act in Georgia?
I'm not sure that I'm
Or it
familiar.
clarifies that the fact that it falls under the territorial act.
I'm personally not familiar enough with the Territorial Act to answer that question.
I'm
I
certainly not.
apologize.
Can I follow up that line of question?
Yeah.
Just to follow up with that line of question, and I'm not familiar with all these things in chapter 3 of this title, but are you saying on line 19 that by saying the supply of electricity by electric suppliers?
You're talking about Chokas's bill, right?
I'm Chokas's bill,
Okay.
yes. I'm just doing that because we were comparing the two. I know we're on Chairman Powell's bill now, but would that make the C-stores, the people that are actually the owners of the charging stations, would that make them subject to regulation by the Public Service Commission by using part 1 of article 1 of chapter 3?
Mr. Chair, I don't believe so. I think that those people, so somebody just operating a store like that, would be covered under the first sentence of that bill, saying a person not otherwise subject to the jurisdiction of the
Okay.
commission.
Just want to make sure. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate it very much.
My thanks to y'all and good luck.
All right.
Oh, I'll hang around if you want me to.
Okay, we're going to start with first person who signed up, Angela Holland. You would, I think most people know who you represent, but please let us know and we'll go from there.
I will for sure. Thank you so much. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for allowing me to come back again. My name is Angela Holland, and I serve as the president of the Georgia Association of Convenience Stores. And we represent large chains as well as small multi-generational businesses in urban and suburban and rural areas. Over the last couple of weeks, we've worked with legislators and industry experts to try to arrive at a piece of legislation that would be satisfactory for all parties involved. And I feel like we've made a tremendous amount of progress. And I'd also like to publicly thank our utility friends for working so closely with us and considering our industry's needs and striving to create a partnership that will be successful in Georgia as our two industries collide. Daily, the 6,500 convenience stores in Georgia process over 6 million transactions, and annually they sell nearly 1.3 million gallons of fuel per location. Averaging one store in every 9 square miles, convenience stores are specifically designed to accommodate cars without disrupting street traffic. And although it doesn't seem revolutionary now, gas stations were the first commercial buildings set back from the street, and more than 200,000 gas stations dotted our roadways by 1935. So for nearly 100 years, motorists have been refueling at gas stations and convenience stores. It makes sense for the electric vehicle driver to search for fuel in the same place as a gas-powered engine drivers search for fuel. But without a business model that makes sense, that includes some statutory and regulatory framework that provides our industry a level playing field, convenience store owners will continue to shy away from building infrastructure. Every location in our industry competes on the same platform. When building a new location, they get to decide which model or name or brand that best fits their location. And they have many choices in the fuel industry with which to partner. But when choosing an electric provider, they have one choice. They have to provide the electricity, or they have to use the electricity from only one utility. And if that same electric provider is allowed to provide electric refueling stations anywhere they can find a parking space with ratepayer funds, asking the PSC to allow them to cover their costs by increasing monthly power bills to their customers, taking zero capital risk like the private sector will, they will create and maintain a monopoly in this market, stifling competition and adoption in the industry. At the onset, this legislation was drafted to do three things: allow traditional retail entities to resell electricity to EV drivers, establish an EV business rate, and afford retailers the opportunity to sell electricity on a competitive and level playing field. Just like a three-legged stool that only offers support when all three legs balance the weight, Georgians and travelers are counting on you to create a strong foundation with all three legs, which will ensure that Georgia meets the traveling and commuting needs of the future. Leaving just one leg out just risks all of us landing on the floor. At this time, we've worked with other stakeholders, and I believe we are comfortable with the reselling of power and even on the creation of a business electric vehicle charging rate. But there is still one issue we have not yet been able to bridge. So we've got two of the three legs. We just need that third one. The last issue this current bill addresses is a level and competitive marketplace. And as you know, the fuel industry is extremely competitive, publishing daily prices on the street for the motoring public to choose the product that best suits their needs. Electric companies, on the other hand, do not have to compete within their market territories. And we determined early in the process that allowing choice in energy providers was a bridge just too far and likely not practical. And as such, we've focused on ensuring a competitive and level playing field as possible. Currently, utility companies rate base or cross-subsidize to the rest of their book of business their charging infrastructure, creating a wildly unlevel playing field, while none of their capital is at risk. And they subsidize their costs with a larger pool of people, not just EV drivers using their services, allowing them to either offer charging services at a much lower price or allowing them to make significantly more profit for their reinvestment. We are not afforded those same opportunities. By creating a separate subsidiary to provide charging stations, the utility company would be competing directly with convenience stores, and we welcome that competition into our marketplace. We believe competition lowers prices for consumers, demands creativity in consumer offerings, and pushes owners and operators to provide the best service and options for customers. Over the weekend, I polled my members, and several of them are electrically ready to install EV chargers. We have members in Griffin, Macon, Peachtree City, Fayetteville, Fayette County, Metter, Brunswick, Port Wentworth, Pooler, Statesboro, Augusta, Savannah, Hardeeville, Chatsworth, Ringgold, Wildwood, Dalton, Rossville, Ackworth, Trenton, Lafayette, Adairsville, Rome, Calhoun, Crandall, Eaton, Flintstone, Villanelle, Rock Springs, Rocky Face, Tunnel Hill, Lookout Mountain, and Cassetta that are ready to get into the EV charging business. They've equipped their locations with electrical infrastructures to start placing chargers where they expect the highest demand. And right now, they can't even sell electricity. We have to assume that this list will grow exponentially when convenience stores have 3 firm legs on which to build an EV charging business. Today, instead of me droning on much longer, I would like to introduce Ms. Haley Bauer. Haley serves on our board of directors and is the 4th generation to successfully own and operate under the Clipper Petroleum umbrella, 27 convenience stores, a wholesale fuel business with nearly 270 retail partners, an environmental compliance management company, as well as a fuel transportation and food service component to their businesses. As she looks to the future of retailing, she can share much more in depth the challenges this industry faces as the electric vehicle industry evolves.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Thank you for allowing me to speak to y'all today about my family's business and the future of the C-store industry and how the resale of power is absolutely necessary for us and many like us to meet the demand of Georgians for electric vehicle charging stations in each community in our state. My name's Haley Bauer, and I'm currently the Director of Marketing of Wholesale Fuels at Clipper Petroleum. Storytelling is a really big part of our company, and so I can't talk about my family or our business and our industry without telling you the Clipper story. Clipper Petroleum was founded in 1933 by a man named Mr. Homemeyer, and the company was originally W.F. Homemeyer Oil Company. Mr. Homemeyer was lucky enough that he went on an around the world trip on the famous Pan Am Clipper airplane. And when he came back, he was so impressed by the service that he received while he was on the airplane that he renamed the whole company Clipper Petroleum. My grandfather was an Amoco sales rep. And so he and another one of his friends that was also an Amoco sales rep, they bought the company in the early 70s. In the early 90s, my grandfather and my dad bought out their partners, and my family and our team have been running and growing Clipper ever since. My sister Caroline and I are the next generation at Clipper Petroleum, and we'll take the reins once my dad decides to retire, if he ever does. And I hope he doesn't, because I love working with that guy. My sister and I are also the 4th generation of family to be a part of the petroleum industry. When my grandfather bought Clipper, we had maybe 30 sites that we supplied. We had none of our own. Today, we own and operate 27 convenience stores in Georgia and South Carolina, and we supply about 270 independent convenience store operators in the Southeast with fuel. Throughout Clipper's 88 years as an energy marketer, we have grown, adapted, and changed to better serve our customers and the communities that they live in and work in. I spoke to the Small Business Committee last year about my family's business and was challenged to speak on the question, what keeps you up at night? For my sister Caroline and I, what keeps us up at night is our industry with the shift to electricity and other alternative fuels. How do we adapt? How do we change? How do we remain relevant? How do we shift our business model to conform to the EV and alternative fuels future and still provide for the 300 plus team members that count on us to support them and their families? Just like the change in our cell phones, just like the change in our internet and the way we pay for things that has changed tremendously in the past 30 plus years, my industry, the oil industry and gas industry, is also changing. An electric and alternative fuels future is upon us. It is here to stay and is growing. I'm here today to tell you that our family business will survive, we will grow, and we will adapt, and we will change. We are currently running at all of our new ground up sites conduit for the installation of EV charging stations. We are also recommending conduit to be run at all of our customers' new sites. Our next step is to install EV charging stations. In order to do that, we need your help to be able to charge for the electricity that powers the equipment that charges the car on a level playing field with everyone in the market. We need the state's help in being able to resell power. We need a level playing field so we can be part of what should be a free market. Throughout the state of Georgia, there are over 6,500 convenience stores that compete to serve the approximate 6 million convenience store customers a day. Our industry has the real estate in place to help serve all the communities in Georgia with charging stations at competitive prices. In order to be able to provide charging services to our customers, we need your help. Please allow us to be able to charge for the power provided to our customers on a level playing field. Thank you so much for your time today. That's all I've got. I really appreciate all that y'all are doing for our great state. And in my opinion, I think small business is truly the backbone of our economy. And, I hope that, and we need your help to ensure that, we can have a future in my family's business and all of the state of Georgia that's in the C-store industry. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your small business. I'm glad to see it still going. A lot of times generationally, they fall off, it seems like.
Thank
So
you.
that's great. Any questions from the committee from either speaker? All right. Representative Camp, you got first.
Hey, thank you so much for your testimony. And again, thank you for being the business that you are and employing Georgians. That's phenomenal.
Thank you.
Especially being a fourth generation in the petroleum industry. This question relates back to the first bill, Chairman Chokas's bill. Does your company have a preference if it was sold by the kilowatt or by the minute?
I think we'd probably prefer per the kilowatt. Right now, the way it's set up, you can charge someone for the space at your store or per the minute, but I think it would be a more honest transaction if it was per the kilowatt hour, because we don't really know how much it's taking to charge an electric vehicle. I'm sure it's probably more than just, what the normal is charging for a minute.
Okay. Follow up. Do you foresee a time when your stores would have price per kilowatt posted just like price per gallon?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how you see it now. And that's why we want it to be competitive. Atlanta, I'm sure y'all pass convenience stores every day. It's a very saturated market. You see all kinds of different prices depending on the brand that you sell. So yes, I foresee that. I also, foresee maybe some other things. Hydrogen is a big thing that piques my interest. And I think that could potentially be another thing that we would see on the market one day.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chairman Martin, you wave. Representative Thomas.
Thank you. And I appreciate y'all's presentation today. I have a couple questions. First of all, right now, gasoline is supplied by, we'll say like the big three, like Exxon, Shell,
BP.
Chevron, BP, right? And when I drive down the street and I see a convenience store, I see Exxon and Shell and BP. What is the difference in the relationship between getting the supply from petroleum-based products versus that of electric-based products? I mean, what's the difference? Why can't we just take Exxon down and put MEAG up? I mean, that's where I kind of get a little confused. So I appreciate a little clarification.
Are you talking about just like gas specific? Sorry, I just want to make sure that I understand your question before I like nerd out on you with
No,
like
I love
boring
nerd out. I'm an
gas
engineer.
things.
I love it. Nerd out on me all day. Okay. But
if-
I guess specifics, it's, you have someone who's making that energy source, right?
Yes.
Being a petroleum product that you sell by the gallon, which is
Yes.
from, Exxon, BP, whoever, right? Well, now instead of getting that per unit energy from a gallon of gas, now you're getting it from a kilowatt,
Mhm.
right? Now, there's obviously a relationship that has to be in place between the convenience stores and these suppliers for energy. Now, that's something that's been around for a long time.
Mhm.
How is the supply of electricity different versus gasoline? Does that kind of narrow it down a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can only really speak for gas, but I'm assuming this would be a similar shift to the future since that's where we're going. But right now, let's just talk about gasoline, and I'll give you all my 2 cents on it. But the gas is gas until it gets to the terminal, and detergents are put in it per the brand. So BP detergent is different from Exxon detergent, is different from Chevron detergent. So Chevron Techron. Techron is their additive that they put in the gas to make it cleaner and better for your car. As far as electricity goes, I mean, I just going off out of my mind, because again, we don't have any EV charging stations, so I can't really speak from, I guess, what we're doing now, but I would think that we could maybe, it would be different power based off of, okay, like we have Tesla chargers, because I know they don't all fit the same car model. So maybe there's ways that I guess we as a marketer can maybe provide a whole slew of charging, I guess, the little hooks and nooks that go on the car. Another thing that Representative Powell talked about, food service is a really big thing that we at my company in particular, Clipper, and that you've probably seen across any gas station that you stop in. Food service is big, and one of the reasons food service has gotten so big in convenience stores is because we are preparing for a different alternative fuel. If you come to a Clipper store and we have the EV charging station, you're not going to sit there for 25 minutes and just like play thumb war or something with your buddy in the car. You're probably going to go in and maybe come to Burrito Loco, our own proprietary store, get a drink, eat some food while you're charging. So, I mean, that's the only thing I can really speak to right now, because we don't have any EV charging stations now. So I don't know if we would base that, I guess, pricing per kilowatt hour based off of the offerings that we have.
Well, let me clarify a little bit more.
Sure.
So when you buy a gallon of gasoline from the refinery or distributor, however
Yes.
that gets from A to B,
It's called rack.
Okay,
Yeah.
from the rack.
Give you
from rack.
the lowdown on
Okay.
all the acronyms and things of the oil business.
But when you buy that gallon of fuel,
Yes,
right?
sir.
When you buy it, do you have multiple sources you can get that fuel from? Or if you're an Exxon gas station, can you only buy gas from Exxon?
So the way that we have it in the oil industry is we have jobbers. It's another kind of acronym weird thing. Sorry to give you all the vocabulary lesson that I know y'all were wanting today. But a jobber is what Clipper is. So we are contracted with Exxon. We are contracted with BP, et cetera, to sell gas to a customer. The way that we get the gallon from Exxon is called rack. It's a rack pricing that they post every day. So, I mean, I'm assuming it would be somewhat of the same if we shifted to EV.
Got it. So I guess
Only we would be talking in kilowatts.
right. So what I hear is there's an opportunities, there's free market system there
Yes,
that's available for
exactly.
you to be able to shop your rates from
Yes.
different
Yeah,
different
because
suppliers.
we don't,
Sorry,
I guess.
Chuck. I know you're waiting, but okay.
And the way pricing is done, I mean, if you look at it, and I'm just being very frank with y'all, this is literally like, if we were talking to anybody, but the way that, we price, and not to talk about pricing, because I don't even know if that's allowed. So sorry, I don't really know all the
Well,
terms.
I think the point is
But
there's a
the
free
point
market
is-
availability
Yes,
where you
it is
have
a free
multiple
market.
sources
So-
where you can get your fuel
Yes,
from.
and we have the rack. So anyone that gets the gas, they can mark it up whatever they want because it's a free market. Like that's what we really ultimately want, to be able to compete.
So but it sounds like to me where the hangup is here is the concern is you only have one source. You can't go to
Yes.
Shell. There's one place that you can
Correct.
get electricity.
Yes,
from,
sir.
Correct.
Correct.
And they control that
Correct.
supply.
Yes, sir.
All right. That's all.
Sorry, I know that was probably around the world.
No,
but
listen, I
did
loved
that
it. I
help?
didn't know what Iraq was.
Okay, now you know. Sorry. I hope I answered that okay.
Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and great testimony and a great family story, and love to hear the history of that. But
Thank you.
a quick question, correct me if I'm wrong, but as an oil jobber, that's
Yes, sir.
part of your business. Do you collect and remit all the excise taxes that come to the state?
I believe we do. Yeah.
So that's one protection mechanism for so the Department of Revenue just has to audit the independent oil jobbers and not the individual C stores or the actual retailers to the state. And a follow-up question, if I
Yes,
may.
sir.
As an oil jobber, do you know who your lobbyist is at the state capitol?
Mr. Roger Lane for GOA. Yes, sir. I've known him a long time. Funny story, not to digress, but me and my sisters, there's three of us, two younger sisters, and we actually pushed his wife, Miss Carolyn, a lovely lady, into the lake when we were little girls because he told us to, and we listened. And she was in like a silk blouse, and my mom wanted to kill us. So I know him very well. My mom still has me grounded too. So
Chairman Martin.
Mr. Chairman, I respectfully ask for another meeting of the subcommittee so we can all tell Roger Lane stories. But I won't get it.
I
We'll
would
do that
love
today. But I do have a question to follow up with Representative Thomas. I mean, the difference here, I think, is we're a regulated utility state. You know, if you were wanting to sell natural gas at your place, you could buy it from whomever marketer you wanted to at a lower place. So that's the difficulty. And so I want to ask you this question. The operative workings of this bill, you know, seem to be on lines 83 through 86, where the commission would approve the tariff, because that's where the rubber meets the road, where you're going to buy this electricity.
Yes, sir.
And it refers to code section 46 3B-1 for the setting. I mean, it goes through and says shall not approve the electric company's tariff unless it meets these conditions. So I'm going to mention what I did in Chairman Parsons' meeting, that the findings on the first page is what it's going to use to do that. And there are a couple of those that I have some questions. Did you guys help Chairman Powell develop those findings? If Ms. Holland or either one of y'all know that, because I know those are important to you, because it's, even if you're competing with yourself, if everybody's on the same page, that tariff's probably going to be higher than somebody driving home and charging their car in the middle of the night at 2 cents a kilowatt hour, right? I mean, it's not going to work there. So did you guys talk about some of those findings? Because that seems, Mr. Chairman, that to make this workable for you, the tariff has to be realistic. To make it workable for the rest of the state, we got to make sure it's not so low that all the other people aren't subsidizing the power that you're getting to sell their cars. So did y'all have input into those findings?
We have had some input into that, and then the charge ahead group has had a lot more input into that. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I don't have the bill in front of me, so forgive me for that. But I believe it in there it does say some information about, or some verbiage about, recovering their costs too.
Yeah, not exactly. I mean, we can talk about this offline, because I
Okay.
know you're doing it.
Yeah,
but
I'll be glad to.
There's development
chat with you more.
mechanisms. There's words like encourage private investment. I don't know what that means to you. Does that mean that it needs to be below, you know, market that you buy it from? I mean, we don't want to be too low, because then we're going to tell you how much you can make. I mean, you don't want us to get in that business, right? I mean, if it's the time you want to be able to have charge, I mean, Uber, if it's, what do they call it, surge pricing, we rode down for $5, you ride back for 25, right? So if it's okay, so I'd just like to work with you on those.
Absolutely.
Great.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We got a number of speakers still to go. All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate y'all. Stephanie. I'm not sure if you and Larry are doing it together or independently, but Come on. Just state your name and who you represent.
Absolutely. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you again today as well regarding both House Bills 1133 and 1322. My name is Stephanie Gossman. I'm the Electric Transportation Manager for Georgia Power Company. And with me today also is Larry Legg, the Pricing and Rates Director for Georgia Power. I will speak to Georgia Power's electric transportation programs and provide some context about market in Georgia. And Mr. Legg will be able to answer any questions related to rates. Before getting into EV charging details, I want to clearly state Georgia Power's position on these bills. We have appreciated the opportunity to work with both bill sponsors and stakeholders to explore the way to best serve our consumers and customers in Georgia and position Georgia as a leader in EV market growth. The sale of electricity by kilowatt hour is one area where these bills overlap, as we've mentioned, and it's important to get this language correct. We fully support the language in House Bill 1133, but cannot go on record at this time supporting the way this issue is handled in 1322, because there are still concerns with the language and specifically in regards to the transactions between Georgia Power and EV charging providers to ensure they are not subject to the jurisdiction of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Additionally, speaking to House Bill 1322 specifically, Georgia Power conceptually supports other provisions in this bill, and we are actively engaging the bill sponsor and other parties to consider these issues and address concerns in the current version of this bill. So in Georgia, we are currently seeing an increased interest in EV adoption. Although we are behind the national average on EV purchases, we're still showing signs of progress that we expect to continue for several years. The latest DOE data from 2020 shows that less than 0.5% of new vehicles purchased or less than 0.5% of vehicles on the road, are EVs in Georgia right now. However, Georgia is thankfully already seen as a leader in publicly available EV charging, which we believe is a key enabler to EV adoption by consumers in the state, since infrastructure has to come before consumer purchases of EVs. To quote an article from the AJC that was released this morning, citing data from Atlas Public Policy Research Group, there are over 3,600 publicly available EV charging ports throughout Georgia, and it's estimated that nearly 18,000 will be required to enable further adoption by 2030. These 3,600 ports are installed and operated by many different EV charging service providers, including utilities, which represent a very small portion of the available public chargers. In fact, Georgia Power owns and operates only 3% of the EV chargers available in the market today. The remaining 97% are owned by other charging providers such as Tesla, Electrify America, Volta, and others that finance or subsidize these investments in a number of ways. Tesla sites likely benefit from the highest utilization today, but they are available only for Tesla drivers, as we've heard and many of you may know. Initially, they were highly subsidized by profits from their premium EV sales that are not affordable for many consumers. Electrify America installs public fast charging sites from funding through the Volkswagen emissions settlement that has been made available over several years. And Volta offers a unique EV charging experience for drivers by offering free charging while displaying paid advertisements. Volta has also recently announced they're expanding their network to include more fast charging, and they're partnering with large retail chains such as Walgreens to deploy 1,000 more sites across the U.S., and more will come. To reach the estimate of nearly 18,000 publicly available EV charging ports by 2030, we need everyone: existing charging providers, electric utilities, convenience stores, and other retailers to be part of the EV charging deployment. It is premature at this time to exclude regulated electric utility programs like ours that represent less than 3% of the market. And in other words, if Georgia is going to close the gap of adding nearly 14,000 EV charging plugs in the next 7 to 8 years, we're going to need all players in the market, especially those who can justify installing public EV chargers in rural and underserved communities. Now, although it's just 3%, Georgia Power is proud to be a small part of this solution to provide public charging options throughout the state because we believe this infrastructure it's a significant barrier to adoption for consumers. The infrastructure programs we're able to offer are critical for customers to help reduce costs for new technology adoption when it's still in its infancy, like EV charging will be for several more years. Georgia Power's community charging program fills a void to encourage drivers who want to purchase an EV by providing public fast charging infrastructure to help build range confidence traveling throughout Georgia. And we currently own and operate 57 sites through this program. This program began as a pilot in 2014 and was later approved by the Georgia Public Service Commission through the 2019 rate case order, whereby we were approved to have $6 million in funding over 3 years in this program. And in the pilot stages, this program added chargers primarily in the Metro Atlanta area. But since the 2019 rate case order, over 80% of these investments have been outside Metro Atlanta, including areas such as Cleveland, Cornelia, Livonia, Trenton, Perry, Brunswick, Leesburg, Metter, Richmond Hill, and several others that have already benefited from the program. Through this program, we were able to provide public fast charging solutions in areas where private sector investments won't be able to justify locating, likely for several more years, such as rural and underserved communities. And we do this through working with customers, including convenience stores, who want to attract drivers to the sites and be a part of enabling EV charging infrastructure. Examples of customers who ask to be part of this program include quick service restaurants, municipalities and cities, lodging, and many others, including the 5 current sites that are at convenience store chains that are all located outside of Atlanta. That's nearly 10% of our program sites that are bringing EV drivers to convenience stores outside Atlanta. And as we've talked about, they sit for a while they're there. While these locations are driven by our customers that want to host the chargers, they also have to meet several standard criteria, including safety, accessibility, proximity to travel corridors, and other fast charging options. We have followed guidance from the Federal Highway Administration to strategically locate these fast charging sites along key corridors to enable long distance EV travel throughout Georgia and help build range confidence. To be clear, Georgia Power is in the business of providing safe, reliable, affordable, and clean electricity. We're not in the EV charging business. However, there is a need for us to be an enabler at this time for key infrastructure investments today to help Georgia achieve the growth that we all expect and want to see in several years. And we are uniquely situated as a regulated utility to be able to invest in our rural and underserved communities. So this technology will be accessible for all Georgians if or when they're ready for it. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak today. Both Mr. Legg and I are here for any questions.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Do you have a question, Chairman Martin?
I have a couple of questions. If you can't feed it back to me right now, just if you would send an email. You mentioned the FERC issue. You had had questions about how this would affect FERC. So I won't drill down to that today, but I'm pretty familiar with that from some national work I've done. I'd be interested to where you find this runs afoul of FERC. And then I want to get back into the you as a regulated utility, putting down these lines. Correct me, and again, just to be clear, I went to you personally and kind of fussed. I fussed at you publicly, went to you personally and apologized for it. So I'll reiterate that to everybody in the room that wasn't, because your rate case did tell you to put out there. I mean, y'all did ask it, and here, there, or the other reason. But is it not? What does an electric charging station? Give me a number for that, just to the closest 10,000, 5,000 or something. What would it cost? Just at the end of the line. About what?
So fast chargers
slow charging
in the neighborhood of $50,000 to $100,000 investment for the hardware.
$50,000. Okay, here's my problem as a regulated utility. If you deploy that $50,000 and it gets put in the rate base, you earn 10% on it. There's a whole lot of people in this room that'll deploy. I'll deploy $50,000 and you guarantee me a 10% rate of return in this economy and a potential profit. You smile at me, but why should you get to do that as a regulated utility? Why should you get to take the money that the Public Service Commission, this has nothing to do with the grid. So why is it that you should get to do that and earn a guaranteed rate of return? And I can't go down the line here. I would venture a guess everybody else would, I mean, I know a heck of a lot of people that are headed toward retirement that would love with interest rates below 1%, that would love a guaranteed rate of return of 10.5% on deployed capital. So how is it that is a good thing for Georgians with electricity?
Yeah, I think certainly understand your question. I think certainly anytime we're making those investments, we're being very strategic and targeting areas that we think will help move this market forward.
Would you take an
time.
investment from me? I'll be strategic along with you.
Right. I understand.
My point is you're saying those things and I'm telling you, there's a room full of people here that will make that investment. It just seems to me as a regulated utility, you've got things, I mean, you got a big project going on that's been going on for 15 years down there. I know it's not exactly Georgia Power, it's Southern Power, and you got partners into it, but I'm not really trying to fuss at you about, but I do, because you were required to do those in your plan that came before the Public Service Commission. But I'm hard pressed that your position as a regulated utility is to move electrons around, push them down, whatever the proper physics description of that is. And of course, the more money you deploy with a guaranteed rate of return is good for the shareholders. And you're going to get an opportunity to do a lot of that. There's going to be a lot of infrastructure to deploy capital. Why are we trying to keep other people from doing that? Why don't you deploy your capital, getting them the connectivity, and let them deploy their capital where they're doing it without a guaranteed rate of return? How is that not better for the person that wants to plug in their car?
Yeah. And again, I think the idea is to help move a market that I believe you used the term is in its infancy along. That's just the answer.
Again, I mean, anybody here that wouldn't invest $50,000 if you had it for a 10% rate of return? Anybody? I mean, there's a lot of people will do that. I mean, we could probably find a good investment banker in Atlanta to start a fund and partner with you. I want to get back to the point of why don't you focus on getting these people the electric? I appreciate what you've done so far. I mean, you've kicked it off when nobody else did, but I'm just asking you the question: if we can deal with the FERC issues, if we can deal with regulation that you're worried about, getting to the Territorial Act, is this legislation a free market piece of legislation that you can get to, where you can support? If you can't answer that on behalf of the company today, I understand. I mean, that puts you in sort of a bind. But if we can deal with the regulatory issues, and Georgia Power is all about, has been, our EMCs have been about bringing, industry in and good free market, issues in Georgia. Is that something that Chairman Powell has going here that you guys can get behind?
And I completely understand the question and appreciate where it's coming from. Our position, as I feel I've stated, is that we need everybody. We need everybody in this. We do not want to exclude anyone.
Okay, well, and again, I'm sorry to interrupt, but is it not true that this bill would allow you to create an unregulated for-profit company, that you do in many cases when you have Southern Nuclear and you have different things that, as the family of Southern companies? Couldn't you do that and still be deploying the capital? The only problem is you'd be competing in the free market. You wouldn't have a guaranteed 10% rate of return.
This bill does have the unregulated piece of it. Absolutely.
Right. So you could still do everything and serve those underserved places in the economy. I mean, you could do that, right?
Yes. And what I shared in last week, and I'll repeat just for the benefit of the group, is there is some precedent in other parts of the country where regulated utilities have not been able to help some of these rural and underserved communities. And then they had to go back and walk that legislation back because some of the investments that everyone says they're eager to make in the private sector, because the utilization's not there, the adoption's not there, and probably won't be for several years, they're just not seeing that come to fruition. Therefore, they had to go back and ask the utilities, hey, would you come back and help us be an enabler?
Well, but again, I want to be clear here, and I appreciate Georgia. I'm sorry, I'll lean in here, but I want to be clear here you're not doing it for altruistic reasons when you're deploying your capital and earning 10%. Let's be clear about that. You know, if we come back and ask you to do it and without earning, without putting in the rate base, you know, that's an altruistic thing that you're doing on behalf of the shareholders for the greater good. But I just want to be clear. I appreciate what the company does, but I'm asking you here, do you support the free market on this? And if we can work with the FERC issues, we can work at issues you have with the regulations. Can we move forward with this and see what the economy of Georgia does for adaptation?
And I'll definitely get back to you on the FERC issue. The other, I don't know how to say it any differently. So
You want to earn 10%. I get it. I mean, that's what
Representative Thomas.
You take a breath. I'm not going to beat you up on the 10%. So I do have one question though, because you say that you support 1133, but you don't support, 1322. There are a lot of the same numbers there. Does that have anything to do with the fact that 1133 does not specifically address anything about forcing you all to create a private entity that resells this electricity on the free market? Is that one of your rubs with the two bills? Because I'm sorry, Chairman Chokas, this may be a question for you later, but I don't see that you have anything.
Chairman, may I respond to any questions?
I don't mean to bounce around.
Yeah, we got a number of speakers. You ask your question, we'll figure it out as we go. But
Yeah.
hang on one
I
second.
guess my question is I'm trying to draw a contrast between the two bills, and it seems like Chairman Powell's bill has some more language with regards to how power would be resold from you as the supplier, right? Whereas Chairman Chokas's bill is more specific to allow resale of power by, convenience stores or whoever, but not specific to say, well, you as Georgia Power, it doesn't take away your ability to compete in that market as a regulated utility. Is my understanding correct there?
is this something you wanted?
I can answer that.
I mean, since
I mean, I don't mean to, but it kind of leads
I don't
into
wanna
the
put
whole.
words in your
But I think,
mouth.
yes, I think you're right. I think Chair, I don't know if you even read Powell's bill yet. It's what you said earlier, but yes, I think Chokas's bill allows it to happen. Powell's bill allows it to happen by meaning kind of anyone can get in the market. Powell's bill says kind of anyone can get in the market except for Georgia Power. And if Georgia Power does it, they need an arm's length subsidiary to sell it
Right. Okay.
without rate benefits.
So with that being said, establishing that, is that what your issue is with Chairman Powell's bill? I mean, is that one of your issues with it?
There's a number of issues. One of them is the language around the sale for resale by the kilowatt hour. And that's
Okay.
where we were talking about the FERC language that I'll get back on. But the other is some of the provisions, just as you've mentioned, and that's because we see ourselves as needing to be part of the market through the regulated entity to enable some of the investments, at least for a time.
See, because I don't disagree with you on the early investments, and I also understand the fact that you're kind of going in. It's a little bit more of an unknown market at this point. You're trying to get something going here. I see on that, but I also have to wonder where free market principles are going to start kicking in, and where there's maybe an unfair advantage. And I think that, but I need to know, I guess right now for the auspices of this question is, I really want to know what the hang up is on Powell's bill versus Chokas's bill. And it sounds like it's the FERC issue. So I'd really actually like to know about that as well, please, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you. One more from Bruce.
Okay. I appreciate the testimony. I'm going to have some fairly quick questions, and they are just questions. Correct me if I'm wrong. The other day, didn't you say you put out 57 chargers?
Correct.
Okay. And, my math says that's about 1.5% of the 18,000 that you're looking for. But significantly of the 3,600 that are already up, that represents 20%. That's a pretty healthy bite at the apple of the 18,000 projected. Didn't you say that we'd need 18,000 chargers across the state?
Yeah, can you help clarify? Yes, it was 18,000 is what was referenced in the article that would be needed by 2030. But can you help clarify where the 20% came from? So I know where you're
Well,
coming
if you
from there.
take 3,600 that are currently deployed and divide
okay.
it by 18,000, we're already 20% of the way there towards the 18,000.
Sure. Okay.
And with all this capital ready to invest in the state of Georgia through our traditional gas retailer establishments and the people that are bringing the intermediary equipment, seems to be an enormous amount of interest towards deploying these things. So practically speaking, it seems like there'll be a fairly fast rollout of the charges themselves. So I just wanted to make sure I was thinking clearly through that. The second question is, I've heard about, the FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Committee or
Commission, correct.
Commission. Do you have specific language you could suggest to prevent this from coming under the control of FERC that you're fearful it might? As I understand it, you're saying this legislation is currently written. You're worried that it could draw Georgia Power under FERC regulatory control. Is that correct?
That's correct. And we do have some language. I know Chairman Chokas's bill is something that we fully support, as I mentioned. Chairman Powell's bill, we've recommended language that is not reflected in the current version.
Well, I'd love to see the suggested language for the FERC concern. Then the Territorial Act concern would be cleared up with the language from Chairman Chokas's bill as well, correct?
I'll have to defer to my lawyers on that.
All right, okay. And we're trying to.
But that's my understanding, yes.
Trying to get it right. Then the final question I had was, and it's to the general, I'm sorry, what's your name, sir?
Larry Legg.
Mr. Legg, I understand you're basically the rate making expert on this. Does this bill as is currently drafted, as far as the rate making piece of it, if you were to hand it over to the Public Service Commission, can you recover your cost of making electricity and distributing it under this language?
Yes, I believe we could, because it's generic language that asks the commission to look at an EV tariff for electric vehicle charging. And part of their responsibility is to make sure that that our prices are fair, that we recover our costs and those types of things. So I would understand that the commission would, that would be part of their charge to make sure that we designed a rate that allowed us to recover our costs.
Thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you. Representative Camp.
Thank you both for your testimony. I enjoyed it last week as well. But one question I have that was brought up just a moment ago, I asked the same question to the convenience stores. Do you prefer kilowatt per hour or by the minute? I'm sorry. Do you selling it by the kilowatt or selling it by the timeshare? Excuse me. I want to clarify that.
So I'll just simply state from an EV driver perspective, we certainly want to represent and support our customers who are serving EV drivers, other public charger providers, as well as for ourselves. And the overwhelming sentiment from them is being able to sell it by the kilowatt hour. And the reason for that is the batteries are sized per kilowatt hour, similar. So you could equate it to gallons, price per gallon, kilowatt hour size of the battery or the tank of the EV, and selling it by kilowatt hour. So it's more accurate that way.
Accurate and probably a lot more uniform and apples to apples when you're comparing, especially hopefully when we do get to the point where there are opportunities for competition so people can go to the station they prefer, the location they prefer. All right, thank you.
One quick question from Representative Thomas.
I love how he prefaced it with a quick.
Yes.
So you said that there's 3,600, I guess, stations available right now in Georgia, correct?
Plugs or parking
plugs,
spaces,
right.
correct.
So how are we reselling that power?
That is, are you talking from the electric service provider side or for EV driver consuming charging?
I'm saying what's the difference between that? We are obviously trying to write legislation to allow this to be resold. If we already have 3,600 stations, I mean, how is that happening?
So from an EV driver perspective, today it is by unit of time, and that varies.
No, not by the measurement of how you buy it. I mean, like, how are we allowed to already have 3,600 stations if we don't have something in place for any resale legislation? Is everything through you all right now? Is everything being sold via?
No, the difference is the kilowatt hour. So being able to sell it, they sell it by time of day. That's allowed because they're not reselling power.
But who
Selling by the
is?
kilowatt hour is selling it by how much power is consumed. That's where PSE
No,
is
but
involved in first.
Who is selling the power?
Third party folks, Blink, I think is one, and a few others, but
So
Blink.
as an electric service provider, we sell to some of these companies I mentioned, right? Tesla is an example, Electrify
Right.
America and so forth. We sell to them per kilowatt hour. They resell by time, and they can choose whether they want to mark it up or have any adders on that today for drivers.
Okay. That answers one. Thank you.
All right. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Chokas, I'll get to you, I promise. Not yet, but I'm gonna get to you. 1 second. Okay. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna go with Justin, who's on Zoom. Just say your name and who you represent.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Can everyone hear me all right?
We can.
Perfect. My name is Justin Ackley, and I handle public policy for ChargePoint. ChargePoint's the largest EV infrastructure manufacturer provider in the country. So hopefully we can add some clarity to kind of some of the issues that have been discussed here today. I want to speak specifically to the difference between Chairman Chokas's bill and Chairman Powell's bill of how EV charging is procured by drivers within the state of Georgia. Currently in 41 other states, the city of New Orleans and the District of Columbia, states have chosen to exempt EV driving similar to the language in Chairman Chokas's bill, a very, very clean, very explicit exemption from PSC jurisdiction. And the reasons for that, they have kind of been brought up a little bit here today, but the primary reason is to allow individuals to buy by the kilowatt hour. And what that means is rather than have someone sit for an inordinate amount of time, depending on the type of charger that they're using. So if it's a level 2 charger, it's a much slower charge. So that potential bill that they could get would be much larger over a period of time as it takes to fill the car. Most charging is going to take place in the first kind of 80%. If you think about similar to a cell phone, if it's empty and you plug it in, it charges very quickly in the very first 80% of the battery and then slows far down when you get to the last 20%. That charge by the minute is just inequitable as you think about individuals using different charging apparatuses across the state of Georgia, whether it be a level 2 at your local Winn-Dixie or a DC fast charger at your local racetrack. So that's really the inequity that we see as far as being permitted to charge by the kilowatt hour, which is more about the consumption by which an individual that has an EV, the amount of electricity that their car is actually consuming from the grid. And it's a much more fair and transparent way of understanding it, whether they're there with a level 2 charger for 45 minutes or they're at a DC charger for 15 minutes. And those charges should regularly be about the same. Moreover to that is it's also opening up the competitive market, which our friends at the convenience stores and so forth have brought to you guys 3 or 4 times by now. You're really introducing a competitive pricing mechanism into the market, permitting these stores, grocery stores, charging gas stations, or any number of individuals that want to get into the charging business. They have an ability to make a market case and a business case to either their board, the owners. If I recall, there was a family-owned business. They can make that private sector market case to say, we can recover these costs, charging our customers X number of cents, dollars, whatever it is, above the wholesale cost that we pay. Very similar to how fuel is procured right now across the state of Georgia. If you pay cash at one place, you can get 10 cents difference than if you pay at a credit card at another place. It just brings balance to the market. Finally, the issue that we see between the Powell bill and the Chokas bill, and I'm happy to talk about both larger as questions come up, but there is a kind of implicity versus explicity as far as the actual language in the legislation. Chairman Chokas comes directly from the Georgia Code. It's similar language to what y'all did for compressed natural gas, which is also a fuel for transportation. 41 other states have an explicit exemption to avoid the issues where you deal with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, whereby if it's deemed a wholesale resale, that falls under the jurisdiction of FERC. Whereas if it's a retail sale, that's only a state issue, and you're not involving any sort of federal preemption at that point. The issue that we take with the Chocus or the Powell bill is it kind of leaves it up to an administrative or potentially legal interpretation. And I don't know, and I work in 14 other states, I don't know any legislature that lets administrative agencies or wants administrative agencies determining what they meant when they wrote legislation. So that's why we're specifically in favor of 1133, is that bill specifically exempts charging from PSC jurisdiction while keeping the tax implications that would be associated with the Department of Revenue in place. So we would advocate for that language to be advanced, whether it be as a standalone, which I think would be our preference given kind of the complexities that are also existing with this other bill, but at least incorporated into Chairman Powell's bill so that we can kind of ensure that this is moving forward in a seamless and efficient manner, similar to other states in the way that they've done it. Finally, my last point, because I know we're running short on time here, is we would an urge, kind of a sense of urgency when it comes to this particular legislation. As I said, 41 other states have adopted similar legislation, very, very clean, exempt from PSC jurisdiction. The reason we would urge that is Georgia is one of 4 remaining states right now in the 2022 session that are considering this legislation. That would bring almost the entire country into balance with how they address EV charging moving forward. And as the federal government determines what the requirements will be for the new national EV infrastructure funding that's coming to the state of Georgia, $135 million over the next 5 years, that money will begin rolling out in Q4 of this year. So to have private sector not understand where the confines of the road are, no pun intended there, but to not understand the rules of the road in advance of that money coming down is really going to complicate things for the rollout of that money in Q4 of this year and moving into fiscal year 23. So we would just encourage the legislature. We're very encouraged by everything that the Assembly is doing down there. We thank the chairmans for their interest in this issue. I've met with Chairman Chocus before. We thank y'all for taking this so seriously, and just I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the members of the committee? There are none. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
All right, let's go with Jay. Welcome. Just let us know who you are and who you represent.
Sure. Jay Smith, Executive Director of Charge Ahead Partnership, represent business associations going to expand the EV charging network, representing folks like C-stores, gas stations, grocery stores, and the like. Going at the end or towards the end makes me want to kind of answer lots of different questions. I also have this superhuman ability to read a room. So each 15 minutes, I cut a paragraph out of my remarks for you all.
Do that before 15 minutes. We only got 20 minutes left. But I do, before we get too far, before I read my remarks, I do want to address 2 things. Representative Williamson's, you mentioned the 3,000 or some chargers. I do think it's important to note that many of those are the slow chargers. And so what we're trying to do is replicate the experience that a driver has today with that kind of faster charge. And then maybe this may be an aha moment or a light bulb going on above your head. But Representative Thomas, you asked the question about what is the difference. You asked the convenience stores, do you have the ability to choose between your provider? And certainly that's a difference where in most cases, with few exceptions with the Territorial Act, they don't have that choice. But really what's more astounding about that, Exxon is not competing with that convenience store that is selling Exxon gas. And in this case, the convenience store is being asked to compete with that entity that is providing the power to them. And so with that, just kind of hope that kind of solidifies really the nuance there of what the difference is. We've all seen the projections and heard how car manufacturers are shifting their assembly lines to build more electric vehicles. However, if that market is really going to take off, we must address what Chairman Chocus correctly referred to as that range anxiety. Where am I going to charge, or am I going to be able to get to my destination on that charge? The majority of EV drivers currently charge their vehicles at home with low speed chargers, and that may work for people who daily commute, who have access to a plug. But that 8 to 10 hour to fully charge a car is not really a long-term solution. And so what America really needs and what Georgia needs is a vast network of accessible, affordable,
and strategically located high-speed charging stations. Recharging your vehicle should be as simple as filling your car with gas. And so the question is, why don't we do that? I represent folks who would like to get into that business. They have the real estate in the most convenient locations for drivers, the amenities drivers want, and the system of transparent pricing, that kind of sign that you see on the street corner of what that cost is. And so really there are two barriers that are preventing us from getting in. And these two barriers really speak to the difference between these two bills. Simply put, first, we cannot compete with power companies who are able to subsidize their costs and pass, and whereas we cannot recover those when we from, they are subsidizing from ratepayers, whereas convenience stores cannot. And second, the rate structure for EV charging, which includes substantial fees, is not workable for businesses to recoup those costs from EV drivers, especially when the power companies are not passing those same costs on to their customers. And so 1322 seeks to address the problem and remove the obstacles that are in the way of private investment stepping up to the plate to bring more EV charging stations to Georgia. This is a pro-consumer, pro-driver legislation, and it brings competition and consumer choice to the EV charging industry. It does three things similar to, first part is similar to Chairman Chokas. It allows for the resale of electricity by non-utility, third-party electric charging operators. We are perfectly fine with the kilowatt per hour. And I think that's a good start. But his bill is really that first leg of the three-legged stool that Ms. Holland spoke about earlier. And so this second bill by Chairman Powell addresses these other two issues. Second, it would require electric supplier to file a tariff with the PSC specifically for EV charging that encourages private sector investment. It doesn't set the rate, but allows the PSC, where rate setting is done, to take care of that. And then third, the legislation protects ratepayers from subsidizing the cost of the EV charging equipment, ownership, and operations. I think if a lot of non-EV drivers realized that they were paying for EV charging, they'd be pretty upset. And the reality is that there are private companies willing to take on those costs and make that investment. We've heard from our friends at utilities that it's going to take all of us. We need everyone to get involved. We agree. We'd like to get into that business, and we welcome them to do it and compete with us on a level playing field. I've heard some say that maybe legislation like this is premature and not needed, while electric vehicles make up a small portion of the vehicles that are on the road. The longer we wait to create an environment where third parties can compete for EV drivers' business, the more difficult it will be to make the investment to build out the EV charging network. And the further along we go down that road, the more challenging it will be. And as was mentioned earlier, from ChargePoint, there is $135 million in federal money coming down to Georgia to build out this network. And we think that the more players that are in that space to do that can make better use of that money. Before I conclude, I did want to address an issue that I've heard raised more than once. And that question is, how do we make sure that rural Georgia doesn't get left out? I just want to leave this statistic with you. 86% of rural Americans live within 10 minutes of a convenience store, and 60% live less than 3 miles from a convenience store. So we have the real estate, and we are in and serving rural Georgians, and will continue to do so. And for those worried about urban areas, that's really one of our more profitable locations, and 89% of Americans in urban areas are within 3 miles of a convenience store. So we are ready to bring EV chargers to Georgia, and we wouldn't be seeking this legislation if we weren't. The issue is ready, and any delay just kicks the can down the road in creating a framework that would really expand the EV charging network here in Georgia. They're coming, we're ready, and I hope you support this legislation.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there any questions from the committee? Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Mr. Jeff Pratt. We got 15 minutes total, and I need 5 minutes to end with Mr. Chokas. So if you don't mind, state who you are and where you're from.
Sure, no problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jeff Pratt.
I am president of Green Power EMC. We're not-for-profit utility owned by the electric cooperatives to provide renewable energy and other clean energy services to the co-ops and help them meet their needs. So it's been a great session and great to hear a lot of the comments here. I think that the most important thing I can do today is to reiterate some of the things that are the testimony from ChargePoint, the gentleman from ChargePoint mentioned, and that is the differences between the Chairman Chokas's bill and Chairman Powell's bill with respect to sales for resale. That's a very important point, and it can be very confusing. We mentioned Federal Regulatory Commission and other issues. You know, our utility business in the state of Georgia and in the United States in general is one of the most complex machines and inventions ever built in the United States. It is very, very complex, and the regulatory structures are very complex. So I hate it, but we are in that place where we have to be very careful that there are no unintended consequences in the rule of law, in the way that we create a different language in these bills. I can tell you that the difference in the two bills is that Chairman Chokas's bill does not focus on all the other issues like who owns the chargers and how the rates are going to be created and all that. It focuses simply on making sure there are no unintended consequences for the sale for resale of electricity. The utilities in the state of Georgia have a statutory mandate to provide retail electricity sales to everybody who wants it. And you're talking about convenience stores, homeowners, gas stations, grocery stores. That is their purpose, retail sales. They generate it, transmit it, and distribute it, and then meter it for retail sales. So the language in Representative Powell's bill is simple, and it's easy to look at and understand, but it creates potentially significant unintended consequences by implying wholesale energy sales, and that's where the FERC comes in. And the testimony from ChargePoint mentioned that earlier. So that's an important distinguishing piece. If you open this up across the board, this 50-year-old law, it would that kind of gives this utility structure in the state of Georgia the framework that it has. We're talking about opening it up for many, many other purposes and reasons, much like they have in Texas and other areas. That may be something the legislator wants to consider someday, but it is a huge distance from the specific topic of EV charging that we're here for today. So I hope that helps a little bit, and glad to answer questions on that piece. I would say that from the cooperative standpoint, first off, we're very, very appreciative of Chairman Powell and his recognition that the co-ops serve a lot of the rural areas of the state. And in doing so, we're not for profit. We don't make a rate of return in similar ways that other utilities, but we do have an obligation to serve and provide service to those rural areas. And not only that, rural areas, charging in rural areas are not just charging for the folks who live there. It's charging for the folks in urban areas to travel through the rural areas to make sure that range anxiety stays tamped down. So that component is very important for us to consider. Charging in rural areas is not just for the rural citizens, although that is extremely important. Someone's got to provide that service. I was really pleased to hear the convenience store testimony about the entities in these rural areas that are interested in creating and engaging with charging. In fact, I hope that I can learn where those are at, because we as utilities want to make sure that they are successful. We would much rather sell the retail sales of electricity to a convenience store than we would put in our own charging infrastructure. So we hope that to be the case. Lastly, I will say that as we move through this process, we're extremely interested in making sure that in this disruptive engagement that we have in the state, in the country, in energy transition, that all the parties have a great opportunity to engage and be successful. Our rates for all of the entities, retail rates, anybody who sells electricity to charge a vehicle is subject to the same retail rates, one to the other. And we want to be fair in that regard as utilities and as co-ops, and we will do that as we move forward. I'll stop there, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So we have a couple questions for you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Related to, thank you for your information. Related to the sale of retail on 65 and 66 in this bill, and FERC, I'm not following that. I mean, I'm not a FERC expert, but I'm. You kind of dropped a bomb in the middle of things. You didn't provide any, any ideal or solution. So I'm going to ask you if this would not, is your issue with those lines that it says the sale of electricity from an electric supplier to an electric provider shall be deemed sale of retail. And that could be the sale to electric to run their office. It could be the sale of the thing to run anything else. So, I mean, it seems fairly simple there that we could say specifically for the purpose of charging charger at the point of metering. Would that not, in fact, take care of that?
I don't think so. And you
Okay,
understand.
well, tell me what you think would.
And I want to,
something's going to happen here.
No, I understand. And I think that the key here is the utility sell retail sales to whoever buys it. That language does not, you could imply that it's not selling retail electricity.
So, but the question here, I know we're wordsmithing this thing into, and I guess I would ask the chair to ask the attorney. It's not that hard to get the folks from FERC in Washington on the phone to look for a safe harbor, in the bill. But I mean, many times people buy things at retail and resell them.
That's right.
I mean, so I mean, if you're saying you're, by selling something at retail that's then going to be resold for resale, doesn't necessarily make you a wholesaler.
That's true.
Okay, so I mean, so help us get to the language on that, because I mean, I see this as sort of a bear in the woods, but nobody can tell me how big the bear is or where the bear is or what I need to do to get rid of the bear. And the point is, everybody knows what we're trying to do here. You're going to buy it for this much. You're going to sell it for this much, and the margin in the middle is what you're going to use to build another store. Okay, everybody's going to do that, and it's on site. So help us do that. That's the question. Help us do that, and can we get a safe harbor from FERC to not get in the way of this thing?
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if there's a question in there or not, but question for me. I get you.
My question was, help us find language. He doesn't like the guy's language, then tell us what
I think
language would be good.
Yeah, we'll work through that with legislative council too.
It's late in the day.
It won't be today. It'll be soon though.
No, I said it's late today.
Representative Bush, you good?
I'll wave.
Any other questions? Yep. Looks like we got one. Go ahead, Representative Milorn. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Earlier, I heard the phrase range confidence. From you, I heard the phrase range anxiety. Are these industry terms? I'm actually curious. Or is there some, when we talk about consumers?
I said range anxiety. I really appreciate the coining of the phrase. I'm not sure where Stephanie Gossman got that, but range confidence. We want to give them range confidence to avoid range anxiety. They are industry terms that we're finding today in an emerging technology that, frankly, none of us have the rules to yet. So we're trying to look at human behavior and make sure that the market is prepared, and that the entities that use the electricity are comfortable using it just like they are any other appliance.
Yeah, it's kind of a joke, but kind of not. I mean, if the industry has these terms, this well established, I think it speaks to the fact that this is overdue, right? We should be putting this framework in place to have this conversation. So no, it's just an observation, but thank you. Yeah,
sure.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you.
Chairman Chokas, you want to wrap us up here? I know you wanted to address us in 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
4
Chairman,
minutes.
members of the committee. I just wanted to make a few points because there were some excellent questions that were brought up by Chairman Martin. And one of the things that he brought up was the advantage that a utility like Georgia Power would have in putting in the rate base. But I think he missed a couple of issues. Number one, as Georgia Power said earlier, these are underserved areas. And Chairman Martin said guaranteed a 10% return. That's true if the meter is turning. But if the meter is not turning. Okay, well, I stand corrected on that. But the meter still has to turn. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
All right. And the next thing that I wanted to say was when we were talking about wholesale and retail, we just heard testimony right now from one of the convenience stores operators, and they have their own convenience stores, but they also sell gasoline to other convenience stores. Now, it seems like that's a little bit contrary to what some of the arguments were made. If they've got a large customer base that they sell that are not their branded convenience stores, but yet they sell fuel to these others, isn't that similar to what we were talking about earlier?
Not regulated.
Rhetorical question. Keep on going.
Okay, well, that was
Yeah,
it. Those were
it.
the only two things I wanted to respond to.
Okay. I appreciate that very much. I don't think we have any questions from the members of the committee. I appreciate everyone's time and attention to this. I think we'll get together, put our heads together to see what we can come up with between the two. And Thursday or early next week, I'm not sure, but it'll be soon. We'll let you guys know, and appreciate everyone's attention to this, and meeting's adjourned.